Welcome, Brandon Nørgaard. You're a researcher and community organizer involved with both the integral community and the meta-modern movement. You're the founder of the Civic Enlightenment Project, where you're building tools and communities for better collective sense-making. You're also a software engineer with a background in philosophy, and you're currently studying wisdom design at the California Institute for Human Science. So tell us, Brandon, how did you become interested in helping to address some of humanity's challenges around sense-making and coordination?
Yes, very interesting question. Yeah, we can start going back that far. And as you mentioned, I have my interests and also multiple projects, pretty diverse. A lot of interest in sub projects and collaboration with different organizations and groups of people. And you may wonder, how did I get into all of that? Well, just to actually start a bit further back. I think my mind, slowly became more interested and more involved in more things. But if we go back to when I was, just at the university, and I was studying computer science. And there's, I think, an interesting connection with where I grew up, or at least something that I tapped into, being from specifically here, which is the capital of California, which is Sacramento, but it's somewhat close to the San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley. And during my studies in computer science, one thing that occurred to me, and maybe it just occurred to me because I happen to have a mind that is really curious about these sort of things and seeing these patterns. But I saw a pattern, and I think, there were other people who saw this, but this is something I really pursued because I thought it was really important, is that technology keeps moving forward, advancing year by year, whereas the government seems to becoming more dysfunctional. The institutions become less capable and less efficient. Now, this was apparent at the California state government, and also very much at the U.S. federal government. And I'm also actually I was interested in international institutions as well, the UN. So I'm seeing all of this. I'm seeing technology and what it seems to be doing, improving people's lives in certain ways, but also making things more difficult and challenging in certain ways, causing other problems. And that I saw an important role, several important roles and functions for government or governance at different levels, including, within the United States, within each state, as the state of California that I'm from, and also at the international level with these, treaties and international laws. I saw some problems that were happening and that have been continuing to happen over, the last 25 years. So I kind of saw, oh gosh, we are headed to some potential disasters. And so I actually got involved. After graduating, I wanted to get involved. That was about 2002, with some philosophy groups, that would discuss these matters. Everything from philosophy to politics and science. And so there are cafe culture, that you can these cafe discussions that you can find and get involved with, and they're in a number of places, if you know where to look. And so I got involved, and I met a number of people, and some people were interested in this new integral or integrative thought, and I hadn't heard of it actually at the time. So some of you guys have actually been involved with this for longer than I have. I hadn't really even heard of integral until about 2019, although I probably had been thinking about certain things, certain related matters, just without that actual framework. And then from there, I got involved with adjacent communities, including the meta modern, and Game B and et cetera. And so now, actually, with my professional career, I was a software engineer and I was working in telecommunications software. And this was interesting because uh, it has actually a certain way that what I was doing was software to manage communication across all these nodes. They needed to communicate with each other, and you needed like an orchestration within this these servers in order to allow seamless and secure communication across a large population. And I saw, okay, well, there seems to be some sociological uh, analogies here. Um, that we maybe there's something we could learn about how we're building this telecommunications software and see if we can apply that to community organizing. We want to foment these community groups to be able to have stronger relations with each other and to be able to have intergroup communication and to be able to give people the tools they need in order to improve their lives, to have get the try to um, have ways in which people can let the leaders, the political leaders, know their true views, outside of just elections, which really have been dysfunctional in recent years, but to get the people to organize and to allow the elected leaders to listen, to the true needs of the people and to have a better relationship there, you know. So that seems to be something that is needed, something where we can learn from technology that is intended for telecommunications and apply it to the sociological context. That was one thing, okay? But then also, okay, around like with the pandemic, there's a lot of um, changes in the economy all of a sudden. So I actually was no longer working in telecommunications software. What I was doing was actually I was trying to learn more about this new integrative thought. With all of the different. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of podcasts. There's videos I was watching. There's a lot. There's a lot of people who are looking at the problems and challenges and risks and threats to our larger society. There's terms that are used, including the polycrisis and metacrisis. So what I was trying to do is understand the larger landscape. And in order to help me understand it, I created some tables, graphs, some blog posts, and I published some of this just, informally. And some people found out about it and said, well, hey, nobody has actually done this yet. And I could see indeed this had a certain sociological connection. I suppose I have just a naturally sociological orientation, to the data, to all of this. So that was the orientation I was taking with my tech job and also with this new, world of integrative thought, or as some people are calling it, the liminal web, as it is, liminal meaning like a window or doorway into a new world. So our current status quo institutions and sociocultural frameworks are decaying and are not capable of helping us respond to the challenges, the unique challenges. And so we are thinking, some people, there's like a niche communities that are thinking about new ways of doing things, ways of creating new institutions or evolving our current status quo institutions to become quite different. So new cultural frameworks. So that's, I guess, the liminal web, and that would include integral and metamodernism, etc. So I was learning about this, and I was taking kind of a sociological approach to it with these blog posts. Some people found out about it. Some people invited me onto their podcasts. I got recruited into a grad school program at the California Institute for Human Science. And so I didn't actually initially think that there was going to be any kind of uh, official grad school program that would be related to this. I didn't think so. I had some family members telling me, I should go to grad school, but I really didn't think that there would be one that was quite as interdisciplinary as I wanted. But when I heard about this one, which is being led by Sean Esbjørn Hargens and also another person who I'm studying under is Nick Hedlund. So the Wisdom Design program with it, which is within this School of Integral Noetic Science, it is based on essentially looking at what kind of social structures do we need to develop in order to cultivate more wisdom in our society, and utilizing these integrative meta theories to do that. So it has, in my mind, it has a connection with sociology and philosophy, and and also, an integrative approach to psychology. I can't say that I'm as well versed in psychology as many of my other fellow students who are foregrounding that in particular. The integral psychology. But I need to be well informed as much as I can about psychology, which is extremely complicated in its own right. I do need to try to be informed in that subject in order to understand the patterns that emerge out of this, which is the sociological, including if we say sociology in a very broad sense would include economic and political, and also be closely adjacent to the cultural side of things. So this is what I'm trying to focus on with my grad school research, looking at approaches to the meta crisis, connections with technology, perhaps, and in fact, I also have a grad school project that I created a website for, and I can tell you about that.
Well, okay, that's wonderful, Brandon. So basically, your orientation towards life has always had some fascination with the systematic, so the connection between things and people and ways that can be optimized. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's fair to say.
Okay, let's very briefly go into the wisdom design. So tell me what that is.
Oh, yes. Wisdom design is a design of social institutions and cultural processes that are intended to promote greater wisdom. And I think this could be done through either an evolution of existing status quo institutions or the creation of entirely new ones. For me, it brings in sociology and philosophy, and also integral psychology as well, which I dabble in, as you know.
Indeed, indeed. But of course, this is what you're studying at the California Institute for Human Studies,
Human science, yeah.
Human Science. And what is the outcome that the study is working towards?
The outcome, well, for one thing, I have a research project already, or at least I've created a website for this, and it's the Civic Enlightenment Project. And so that is civicenlightenment.org. And what I'm basically looking at is how can we implement processes that lead to holistic community development, covering different areas of life that are needed within civil society. Within a city, you have what we're thinking is different civil society organizations that would interact with each other and collectively would provide pathways for holistic community development.
So define civil society for people who might not be familiar with the term.
Okay, that is largely informal gatherings of people to do things that are interesting to them, like these social groupings, and that clubs, associations, organizations, um, some of which are based on recreation, arts and culture, uh, learning. We don't have to just think of education as something we do when we are children or adolescents, but that we are continuously learning throughout our lives, and that there can be groupings of people that are bring people together to learn, to have fun together, to do things that are interesting to them. Now, actually, there's been a movement away from this in recent years, even though Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote about a democracy in America in the 1820s, he was from France, and he saw that the then nascent United States of America was a world leader in civil society as he saw it. So we always have had that culture here. But in recent years, here in the US and in other countries, there's been more of a tendency to just stay home. And the only civil society you're getting is through your screens. Um, and that is not good for psychology, for human development, for our relationality. So we want to promote more in-person gatherings in more cities and towns and um, suburbs and urban centers throughout the landscape. Now, I feel that this would need to be supported by institutional frameworks if we can. And normally, civil society operates within uh, the nonprofit sector or community-based organizations, but it could be also supported through private enterprise. It could also be supported through the government. Um, Now, there's an incentive structure within a lot of these major corporations where they are just concerned about profit, and they want to extract time, attention, mental effort, and emotional energy from the employees to maximize profit. So they're not as concerned about fostering well-being among the people as much. And the government, as we know, as I stated earlier, there's been an unfortunate decline in the effectiveness of government, and the people at large in many countries see the government as being increasingly dysfunctional, and they have a point if they see things that way. So what we could try to do, though, without extremely high amount of resources, this is a much easier to bootstrap, is to have these civil society groups that are supported probably by nonprofit organizations, or even more informally just by community leaders who want to take the initiative to organize. Normally, you would need some sort of community leaders to organize things, to hold space. And these are settings in which educational or recreational, or arts and culture events can take place, or also public service. They can be oriented toward a number of different any age groups, or demographics, and they can also involve connection with nature, or creating and constructing something, giving people a sense of accomplishment, that they built something or did something.
Yeah, so to give support to your point of the importance of civil society, a couple of years ago, I read a book by Anne Applebaum who wrote about the Eastern European countries that were basically incorporated into the Soviet Union's sphere of influence as satellite states. And she described how the first steps of basically creating these subordinate states was that the Soviet Union would basically infiltrate all sorts of civil society projects and basically demolish them from the inside out, and that would lead to significant levels of isolation among people within the populations, and that therefore it was much easier to basically implement a draconian rule, Soviet style. And so basically what you're saying is that if we see the civic activities within a society as, let's say, a sort of glue between peoples and something that is beneficial to the society, then increasing the level of activity within civil society could lead to a much more healthy and fruitful and developmentally oriented society.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So let's see if we can get into the concrete effect of the things that you've been speaking about. So basically, if I reduce it to its simplest form, you're trying to support the emergence of hubs all across the world, basically, where people get together to facilitate the evolution of human awareness and society.
Yes.
Okay. How is that concretely happening? What are the things that you can already point to and say, okay, these are the people that have been doing that, they've been doing that in this way, and these are some of the results and benefits that they've experienced? What can you share with us?
That's a good question. Well, I've actually been recently trying to figure this out for my grad school research. And as a result of working in this area to try to see what is happening, what can we leverage, and where can I do my sociological research, I actually got recruited into a project with the Mediators Foundation. And they have a number of projects underway, one of which is called Better Together America. And they have a network of hubs that are being led by hub builders that are trying to organize in their local area and trying to get people to connect with each other, to say how they feel, to offer, deliberative processes to see what kind of social change and political change they would like to, uh, and also to see like how to get engaged in the political process, to offer pathways for democratic resilience and civic engagement. And that is one thing. Now, actually, though, I'm also drawing from the work of Hansi Freinacht. You may be familiar with that. That's political metamodernism. So it's not only based on developmental models, a multi-dimensional developmental model that the Hansi Freinacht authors got from, in partially an inspiration from Ken Wilber, but also the second book in particular is quite influential to me. That's the book called Nordic Ideology, and wherein there is, partially based on a study of how did the Nordic countries become, by many measures, they are happier and have better functioning government and have higher social trust. So this is one success story that we want to see how we can implement this in other countries where democracy seems to be threatened, including where I live here in the United States. And we are looking at that now. The Hansi Freinacht, that book, it has a model it calls Montesquieu 2.0. And if you are familiar with the work of Montesquieu, he came up in the 18th century with this model of separation of concerns across different branches of government, which actually ended up being adopted by countries and governments throughout the world. Now, I feel that this is being threatened here in the United States because there isn't as much of a separation of concerns, but that was, the idea. It was a revolutionary for its time, and it proved quite effective because it had this separation of concerns between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. And there's different ways in which this has been implemented throughout the world. Within the United States, we were supposed to have three branches, and I think in other countries they maybe only have more like two. Wherein like I think parliamentary systems such as Britain, they have the government is kind of an extension of the legislative branch, so that the executive is not fully distinct, but at least they have some form of separation of concerns. And so the idea being that there isn't any one person or cabal or family or party that dictates what should be the law and how the law should be implemented. And this also draws from the work of Francis Fukuyama, who I think that he might have been drawing from what worked in and what didn't work in Japan, the land of his forebears. And he's looking at, okay, what leads to political stability and what doesn't. And he's also obviously drawing from the Nordic countries, but he broke it down to three main factors, and this is where you should have institutions. For one, an administrative state that is run by rules and norms that again are not just simply dictated by a single party or cabal, but that function independently of that based on certain processes, and a rule of law that applies equally, regardless of whether you are wealthy or poor or connected or not. There are certain rules, certain laws that you should not be able to break. And now we see that breaking down here as well, where the ultra wealthy in many countries, such as my own, the rule of law does not seem to apply to them. But it often does apply to political opponents, And so the third factor that Fukuyama identified is accountability, which doesn't necessarily have to be implemented through elections and democracy, but that's the most common way that it's implemented. And there could be potentially other ways in which that's implemented. But this is where when the ruling party or the political rulers make mistakes, there should be accountability. So because otherwise they don't need to take into account how well things are going. Even though Fukuyama gets a lot of flack for writing a book in the early 90s, the end of history, which did not age well, but he's got a lot of other really good ideas. And so in fact, I think it was in the decade of the teens when he wrote this two-book series on the rise and fall of political order. And that's what I'm basically summarizing here. So bringing that together with the Montesquieu 2.0 model, which tries to extend this this idea of separation of concerns, but how can we implement that? How can we get more perhaps types of institutions? So in fact, looking at how the Nordic countries seem to have the factors that led to this development of a more functional political culture. So and seeing how we can take this even further. wherein in the Montesquieu 2.0 model, there are separate institutions for, democratic resilience and participatory decision making in its own right. Like that is an institution. That is a certain way in which we need like people who are professionals in this area and frameworks that are then implemented and brought to the people. So that's one. Democratization politics, and overall, there's actually six of them that are supposed to cover actually the relations between first person, second person, and third person epistemics and the development of these. So those relations end up being a total of six. And I'm not sure if you want me to round out all of the six right now, but
What I'd like you to do is to go as concrete as you can, and so I want to invite you to give people a sort of a vision of where are we now? What is the pathway that you're proposing to a different outcome in the future? And what will that practically and concretely look like? What's already being done, and where can people perhaps connect to hubs that already exist, or how can they engage with the let's say the framework of theoretical ideas that shape the behaviors that can lead to the most effective outcomes.
and indeed, yes. Well, this is why I ended up getting into that explanation of these components because like within the United States, this network of the Better Together America hubs, and then I think that there's also in other countries similar hub networks. So the idea is that the way I see it as connecting this with the Montesquieu 2.0 model, those sort of hubs are like democratization politics. They align with that in the Montesquieu 2.0 model, and those are important. But also, what I'm doing with my grad school research is I'm thinking, okay, those are important, but there's only so far that they're going to go because we have interdevelopment challenges. There's a lot of shadow. There's a lot of individual and relational shadow, and that we need to actually work through another institutional framework and another hub network in order to address those. And so that's why there's an important partnership with the Interdevelopment Goals organization and where they have local hubs as well that are apolitical, but that are working on those five areas that five domains that the IDG group wants to work on. That includes relation, being,
Thinking,
thinking, yes.
action, action, and what's the other one?
Collaboration, I think, is the fifth one. So those are all important. So if we have processes, apolitical processes of working through those at the local level, and there needs to probably be community leaders for each of these. So though it wouldn't though be the same community leader who is stewarding a democratization hub as the one who is working on this interdevelopment hub. But those need to stand in relation to each other. And those are available, in fact. And if they're not yet available, we want to actually foster this. We want to identify the people who could hold space and have these events and give them the support they need in order to do that. And then we want to also work with them to gather data on how this is going. And at least this is my grad school research. It's rather ambitious, but that's the idea with the Civic Enlightenment Project.
Okay. So where will the data be gathered? Will that be through the Better Together hubs?
What I'm doing actually with Mediators Foundation is that we've recently been establishing, and it's not exactly on the website yet, but it's a sister project to establish the needed technical infrastructure to do this and to be able to gather this data We're calling it civic intelligence infrastructure. So that's one of the projects I'm on. In order to make a living, I'm, essentially a software developer, and that's one of the projects I'm working on. And then once that gets established, then I'll have a better way of actually doing this grad school research to be able to do that. So multiple lines of work underway simultaneously. But I think I should be able to, give a more pointed answer to your question. Can you repeat that?
Well, so I understand you're building the architecture and the
Mhm.
infrastructure necessary
Yes.
for gathering data about
Hmm.
the functionality of hubs and how they can be scaled up.
Hmm.
But I'm wondering, because it's not yet clear to me what the precise activities are. Because if you're building a digital infrastructure, is it all going to be online or are people meeting in person?
It's definitely in person. The idea is to actually make it minimize the friction
Mhm.
for local community leaders to gather people for any one of these functions. Now, within the Montague 2.0 model, there's like 6 functions, but there are perhaps different ways of enumerating that. But each of these, I think ideally, you would be operating within some sort of an international NGO. You're a local affiliate of that because they give support into what the curriculum would be. They have processes for interconnection with other similar hubs in other cities and regions. You can learn from each other. And then there's also kind of a domain, so that we don't, I think, at least my hypothesis, and drawing from the work of Hansi Freinacht, is that we don't want any one of these hubs to be try to be all things to all people, which has been a sort of a tendency within the religious and spiritual community in recent years, and it's been pathological, where they're providing people with the needed spiritual guidance, but then they're also becoming more and more political, and then that is they're only pretending to be spiritual, and they're really just political, and they're trying to also provide inner development work, but that turns into just a bunch of more pathological, rather than positive, development. It's more, negative development leading into
Mhm.
a culture of resentment. And this is what I'm seeing within the evangelical community in the United States. So we're thinking, okay, how do we separate this based on this meta-theoretical model, and having people hold space at a local level, um, in-person events within certain constraints, and having affiliations with international NGOs and doing events, that are working on that, and they're developing communities, they're developing relations, and they're imparting wisdom to the people, co-creating a better future based on that particular domain. And then the fact that you have each of these domains somehow being held by certain community leaders somewhere in your city, and they should have some relation with each other, and that collectively provides a pathway for holistic community development.
Okay. So, very briefly, take us into the difference between what you're saying as democratic hubs, basically, and political hubs, because it sounds as if you're making a distinction between partisan and basically participatory civic engagement.
Indeed, and I think that I didn't mean to have a distinction in particular between the democratization and the political. It was actually, the distinction is more between like democratization slash political and apolitical, inner development work. And also that there you could have another distinction between either one of those and, the information evaluation and sense making. Now, some of these, it's inevitably going to be political, but we want to actually, rather than just trying to have these hubs as a rally for a particular partisan or ideological orientation, we want to help people co-create and figure in and have these, deliberative processes to figure out what they want, what their needs and priorities are. Um, but there are some that would actually be as apolitical as possible. So that's the distinction that I would make.
Okay. So then um, elucidate the six categories, because I think you just mentioned three of them. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So I see, that like for each of these, the most powerful way that I can think about it being implemented is to look at how, what examples we have within civil society there are. Now, the original Montesquieu 2.0 model of Hansi Freinacht was looking in particular about within government bureaucracy. But I'm thinking, how would this be implemented within civil society, which is not exactly being a part of the governmental infrastructure itself, but by NGOs. Okay, so we have the democratization politics. That's one. Okay, another is the empirical politics, and that's what I would say the closest implementation would be local participatory journalism hubs. Information evaluation and sense making, and that kind of cafe culture. Um, and a third would be existential politics. And the closest thing I can think of would be the Inner Development Goals and their network of hubs, as we've mentioned, those five categories. And so then to continue, there's another three that we haven't really touched on, but one of them that they within the Hansi Freinacht books is called Gemeinschaft politics, and that's they're using a German word for this, but perhaps one English term that could be could be an approximate equivalent would be like fellowship, or just like in this case, I would say it would be implemented through arts and culture or recreation, or just we are enjoying life here. We are in building ties with each other in communities without really so much of a goal other than to have this enjoyment in life and to create things. And so then for the final two are actually, and in fact, I had to take a little bit of liberty with the model, to adapt it to this, civil society, especially in the country in the U.S., but I also believe in other countries as well. So one of them is the uh, emancipation politics. So this is looking at ways in which we are oppressed, and how we can provide more liberation in life. Now, I had a bit of a struggle in figuring out how to implement this, in civil society in the U.S., because we already have a huge movement of people who are saying, "Oh, we're so oppressed by the government," whereas the government isn't really doing a lot, So, um, instead, what I did was I actually looked at the distinction between positive rights and negative rights of what was his name? Isaiah Berlin. And yeah, and he the idea though is that negative rights are okay. I have freedom of speech. I have freedom to move around and etc. And the government, nobody or nobody else should be oppressing my freedom in that regard. That's a negative right. And but then there's also positive rights. What he calls positive rights, which are I mean, you could probably also just use the term entitlement. Um, and to say like I wouldn't be alive if I didn't have water, clean drinking water. I need shelter. Like, what good is it really to have this freedom of speech if I'm going to die tomorrow because I'm going to starve to death, So these are positive rights. And so one thing actually what we're looking at is how to implement this in countries where these are being threatened. What the bigger threat to people's livelihood is not so much in the negative rights, but in the positive rights. So therefore, what we're seeing is the best civil society implementation are these service groups that are trying to provide people with improved material well-being. Um, and so that's and I would say they're both important, both negative rights and positive rights. They're both important, but that in different proportions based on what the biggest needs are. Okay, and then the sixth one is the politics of theory, which in the Hansi Freinacht books is described as the processes through which there are narratives that give people a sense of meaning and purpose and help people understand their what ties everything together in life. And what I was thinking was that the best implementation of that would be, essentially spiritual groups, organizations, churches, and there are some that are more capable of working within this sort of meta-modern framework than others. I mean, they would have, in order for them to align approximately with the Montesquieu 2.0 framework, they would have to be self-reflective and capable of reforming or capable of utilizing this critique of their model. So, within Christianity, they have a certain narrative of here's where the meaning of life and the relationship that life has to Christ and etc. Within Buddhism, they have a different sort of narrative, but that and some institutions actually already have processes where they're trying to kind of integrate these. There's a spiritual organization that I've been involved with called the Unity Church. There's another one called the Unitarian Church, or Unitarian Universalist Society, as it is, I think. And then there's other, that are more within just strictly speaking Christianity, but they're taking an open-minded approach to it, and they're open to this sort of critique. As long as we don't have, I think that the churches or spiritual organizations that are taking a very hardline dogmatic approach wouldn't be conducive to the sort of meta-modernization that we're talking about here. But those that are, I think, could fit into this framework and could align with this politics of theory, approximately speaking, as I see it.
Okay, so help me understand how the tension would be navigated between, in this example that you say, for instance, a particular religious institution being more dogmatic. So within an integral framework, we could perhaps say, okay, let people be where they are. And at the same time, of course, if you're aiming for a deliberately developmental civilization, you can also say, okay, then also needs to be an off-ramp from those institutions to, let's say, higher level or later stage development levels, so people can sort of go through a trajectory of development across the span of their life. So how do you see the tension between, on the one hand, having this framework which sounds as if it's aimed at some level of homogenization, and at the same time honoring the diverse developmental levels of everyone in civic society?
Yeah, there's a lot of room for people to have different narratives of life and the overall meaning and purpose. So it's not a homogenization. Now, admittedly, though, one approach is a unity within diversity model that the perennial philosophy offers. That's one approach. Now, there are some who would critique the perennial philosophy as being kind of neo-colonial, and in fact, in the fall quarter at CIHS, I took a world religions class, and the professor had that opinion, although I don't agree. And I wrote a final paper for the class explaining how you would be able to still honor these different narratives and spiritual systems within a perennialist framework.
Interesting. And another point of tension that came up for me while you were speaking is that for me personally, there's not really an inherent logic to the division of these six areas of civic society. So it's it's interesting to me to reflect on the potential arbitrariness of
Oh, yes. That's a very good question. And actually, so for one thing, it's possible that in many cities they would more collapse into just like three. Just to say, okay, we don't want any one institution to try, any one civil society institution to try to be all things to all people. We don't want that. It's better if we have, figure out like what's your lane, what's my lane, and that we collectively work with each other through some sort of a separation of concerns. Um, but the Montesquieu 2.0 model with these six actually is there is a rhyme or reason to it, which involves the relation between the first and second person or the second and third person development. So and it is based on that just fundamental meta-theoretical model of first, second, and third person epistemics, but that you can start from, like, for example, first person epistemics and move into second person epistemics and have a developmental process on that. So as you have, three, and essentially, if you're talking about relations between the three, you have six. So and I could, spell that out in more detail. I think that, we'd have to kind of nerd out a little bit to really demonstrate that. There's a table in fact, on the Civic Enlightenment Project website, there is it presents a table which has starts from the one provided in the Hansi Freinacht books, but then I add some additional correlations, how they apply to civil society.
okay. So we could say that, for instance, the inner developmental goals is the I, the first person, and perhaps spiritual development will also be that. And then we have the relationals, the we, which would
Mhm.
be two of the other categories. And
Yeah,
then we
yeah. For
have,
example, like if we have, we're trying to understand what's going on in our world. That's very much third person, but we have to have a first person perspective onto that, So maybe that's the way in which empirical politics could work, you know. And then also with the Gemeinschaft or fellowship kind of politics, that there's a relation there between a first person and a second person relation. And then that if we're talking about people's material well-being, like I need food, I need shelter. There's a third person understanding of what that is, but it's my relation to that matters. So we're trying to develop that, so to consider these relations between those fundamental epistemic categories and the developmental pathways that open up, so there ends up being a honeycomb model. But that's just one way in which it could work. And that I have some people who I'm working with who think it's a bit too complicated. There may be too many moving parts, and it would be better just to collapse it down to three. And then, that's something you could more easily explain to people and you could more easily demonstrate, and it might be easier also to gather the data around it.
yeah. So coming back to the concrete. So let's say that people would like to join a hub somewhere, and which existing hubs do you already know of, and what would be their themes, and how could people attend?
That's a good question. Yes. And one thing I can say is that during this early phase, I'm allowing people to reach out to me. There's a form on the website for civicenlightenment.org, and I can connect you to local hubs. And the best way that I do that is to look at what are these NGOs and their affiliate networks, and what is happening locally. The interdevelopment goals, they have these hubs, and there's some sort of person or a group of people who are stewarding that locally. There's other organizations as well that have their local hubs, and so I can try to connect people with that.
Okay, so just to make it as concrete as possible, you are in Sacramento. Say that you this week would want to do something with a hub somewhere. What could you do? What would be the options for you?
Oh, yes, that's a good question. Now, there are organizations that are publishing their events online, and so there's as it is now, there is it's a little bit disconnected, and this is one of the things I'm thinking. Okay, how can technology make this a little bit more frictionless? Okay, there's some platforms, including Meetup, Eventbrite, etc. There's a social network called Hilo. I'm trying to make it so that the information is provided, and easy for people to see what events are happening, what hubs are happening, and how to get more involved there. Where to meet, what is happening, at these events, and how they can actually develop a broader, in public, in person social life, and also for a lot of people who live, a little bit further away from, a downtown center, or don't quite have maybe the time to be involved, in in-person events. There's a number of online events as well. There's a lot of those groups that are happening. So to have easier processes for people to get involved, and also easier processes for someone who has the energy to hold space, that's one of the things I'm trying to do.
Okay, so the meetup groups that are in existence now, what would be the themes that are active at this moment? Is it philosophy discussions? Is it more around inner development goals? What are
There's
the
well, yeah, in Sacramento, actually, I'm organizing three different groups with some a group of other organizers, and we have one of them is an inner development goals hub. One of them is for politics and philosophy discussions, and current event sense making, and another one is for arts and culture discussions and experiences.
Excellent. Okay, and of course, Normali also organizes. I think it's a monthly gathering in
In Boulder, yeah.
Boulder, and she does that in one of the local libraries, I think, and people can get together and they engage in all sorts of practices together. So that would also qualify as a hub, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So what do you see as the future? Because I understand you're in an early stage and you're setting up the infrastructure and the digital necessities. Where do you see this going? And let's say people would like to get involved with the building of the initiative and to make it possible. What needs to be done? How can people contribute potentially?
Well, one important line of development here is the technical, is the uh, the software side of things, and it is an engineering challenge that we're working on. One of the important things actually is that we don't want to rely so much on uh, these walled gardens, these major social media companies that are extracting our time and attention and are parasitic. We also want to be able to own our own data, and we want to be able to transfer our data or have it somehow interoperable across multiple platforms. I'll admit that's not going to be ready tomorrow, but that's an important line of development. That's also how I've been, making a living, in recent months here. Although we do need probably significantly more financial investment to really make that work, so that's something we're working on. But in terms of what people can do, they can be involved in these and help. If anybody has the energy to help build some of this, and not necessarily the technical building, but the building of hubs, through human connections, then you could probably reach out to me again through the form on that website, and we can co-create that.
Well, excellent. So take me through the steps that people would need to go through to create one of those hubs. So what did it look like for you, for instance? Or do you sort of connect people in your network and you say, okay, let's get together, and How do you do it?
Well, there's a few different possible processes. For the inner development goals, I really just wrote to them and said, there isn't a hub here in Sacramento, along with some other people who were co-creating that. Marty Behrens is one who co-organizes that. They allowed us to create that, you know, and so we also needed to get a little bit educated on the framework and to be able to do that, to have these events that are oriented toward that, what they do. And so now with the other types of hubs, I mean, for example, with Better Together America, I think that there's a way. Admittedly, I don't know. I think there's a way to reach out to them and say you want to do that, and they'll give you some information and some materials on how to be a part of their network, you know.
Okay. So just for people who perhaps don't know that the IDGs, the Inner Developmental Goals, they're basically a response to the Sustainable Development Goals formulated by the
Yes.
UN, so the United Nations, and basically around ecological awareness and reduction of environmental destruction, etc. And the Inner Developmental Goals are basically ways that we contribute to our own development so we can align with the most constructive orientation and attitude towards planetary awareness and making things better. And it's an organization, I believe they're in Sweden, is that correct? The IDG?
Yes.
And so what you did was you contacted them and you said, okay, we want to set up a hub. So what goes on? Take us through, let's say, the first session that you've done where people attended.
Yes. Well, what we did was we met at a park, and we utilized a book of authentic relating games that was written by Sarah Ness, and we went through these, and we had these practices that we would go through, and more recently, actually, the most recent event we did of this type was co-hosted by Claudia Domosk. I'm not sure if you've heard of her. She is working on a book, and I think her book is coming out in a few months. But she's involved with a lot of these organizations, and a lot of people are familiar with her very amazing and powerful work in relation development. So she had us. It happened to be actually on the morning of Valentine's Day, so she was getting us to look at the broadly speaking, the different ways in which we feel love or a lack of love in our life.
Okay. So that sounds as if both those themes were relating, and was that then the context that you frame it theoretically and say, this is that part of the IDG model, and we'll be doing things around this?
Yeah, we do, and we tried to actually cover the at least the five main categories of the IDG in these events. We
Okay.
make an
So
effort to do
every
so.
session.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe alternating sessions is, that we would somehow cover each of these.
Okay. And does the IDG organization supply basically an outline of the session with the materials, or is that sort of what you do as the host?
I think that it would be good if we had more of that. I mean, this is one of the technical architecture patterns that I'm trying to establish. Now, I think that they recently they established a new platform for this. I haven't really gotten that much into it, but the idea in general that could apply to any of these hub networks is that the hubs in local places can learn from each other, and they can somehow get support from the network leaders, the people who are running the NGOs. So there's some like uh, curriculum or kind of an outline of how to do an event that could then be utilized, you know.
Okay.
Um,
Now that sounds good. It also sounds as if the the hub structure might benefit from having a library of practices based on the
Yes.
particular themes.
Yes.
Okay. Um, from my perspective, the more we get into the concrete manifestation of the hub practices, it becomes more it becomes easier to imagine what it is, what's in it for the people attending. So can we go even deeper and perhaps report what your experience has been? What has it brought you? What have the treasures been that you've gathered from these meetings?
Well, gosh, I think that with the inner development goals, admittedly, there's been some careful shadow work, that with some of these events, the ones I think that are the most uh, powerful to offer this sort of transformation. You would want someone who is has that skill in professional training in relational facilitation. And then you have the ability for a group level shadow work. So the there's some like frustration a lot of us are feeling, and the way the world is at work going, there's a lot of stress on a lot of us in trying to do good work, trying to address these challenges in society, but then struggling to make a decent living. So that can come out in anger and frustration. In fact, sometimes uh, we could find that we are less than polite to people who should be natural allies. So that's one thing. Another thing is, like, for example, within these more empirical politics aligned groups that like cafe discussions about current events, sense making, to be able to see different viewpoints outside of your intellectual or ideological reality tunnel, and to be able to see, how people see things who come from maybe different backgrounds in life and their way of making sense of the very complex current events that are unfolding, and to see different, perspectives coming from different, some people come from different countries, or they're maybe they've been consuming a different media source. And as it happens with the contemporary world, we're seeing that people are in non-overlapping Overton windows. So like you can, and the Overton window is the universe of acceptable discourse. Like within these bounds, that is acceptable, and if it's outside of that, then it's unthinkable. So it could be that you have two different people in the room who have non-overlapping Overton windows. So they both think that the other one is just crazy. Now, actually, there's ways in which we can try to with civility, bring the facts onto the table and to try to have good faith in each other, which is helped by the inner development goals, inner development processes as well. So if some people have partially gone through that, then it's a little easier to sync up the Overton windows and to have these intellectual conversations wherein we come closer to each other.
Excellent. So thinking about the project that you're engaged in and the different levels of experience that are involved. So at the ground level, we have people in societies who are looking for connections, who are looking for ways to contribute to a better society, basically, and a better world. So they come into, let's say, a particular world, and that world is connected to other hubs in other places, and people facilitating these hubs are in contact with each other. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm getting is that there are multiple levels of complexity, and that because you're creating the architecture to support the whole, that you're seeing the whole system from above, basically, and communicating it as this intricate network. And my experience is that the more we zoom into what it means for the people that would like to participate, the more alive it becomes. So what more can you share about that ground level and about perhaps the interaction between these hub leaders, for instance? Is that online, just given the nature of the world and technology? Tell me more about that.
Yes. Now, admittedly, the interaction between hub leaders that are, of a similar orientation, maybe they're within the same network, the same NGO, just in different cities, that would be online. I would hope that there were, better processes for them to engage with each other and to share ideas and to share what's working and what's not working, what kind of processes are working best. But then also within the same city, this is where I actually coined the term meta hub. These are hubs of hubs, wherein the constituent hubs are qualitatively different from each other. And those are interaction patterns that we want to foster. And that I would think that these hub leaders could and should be joining each other's events.
I see. And so what would the motivation be for the local hub organizers to come together in the meta hubs?
I've been trying to see if we can inspire people with terminology such as holistic community development and the idea that there are things that you're doing, that you're really good at, and that there's things that you could learn from someone else, and that you could then have someone else take the leadership on this area of life. So you're both a leader and a student. So that then you stand to gain a lot from participating and from leading in different kinds of events.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds to me as if this is the most logical evolution of human interaction at scale. At the same time, it also sounds so complex to organize.
It does. And fortunately, this is not something that people would have to memorize if we got the technical architecture in place. The information would be there, and the referrals and recommendations and suggestions would just be foregrounded for you.
Yeah, so take me through that. Let's say where it's 2030 or 2035, whenever you envision that this meta hub system will be operational, what will my experience be as someone coming into this world? So for instance, I enter into one of these IDG sessions, and then perhaps I set up my own hub, and as a hub facilitator, I connect with other people. What will the experience be like?
You're right that I haven't thought enough about this yet. I haven't done enough brainstorming about that quite yet, and that I think that I want to invite people to think about these sort of interaction patterns and how it could take place. And As you know, admittedly, when I was thinking about this just in recent weeks, I was thinking about, something like uh, using your phone to find how to get off your phone in the city, and then using your phone to see something like a what we used to have flyers on. Like I go to some place, I'm doing something, and there's like a bulletin board with a lot of flyers. Oh, and then I could do this thing. So a little bit more of a nudge to see, okay, I want to expand my areas of interest, and this is some adjacent thing that I want to be a part of, or that you could have multiple like subsequent events in the same location that are focused on different areas. But this is something I haven't put enough thought into yet, and that we could have design processes around what the question that you've raised there. And it could
Yeah,
be co-creative, it could be a collaborative process. So one thing I can say is that there are organizations that I'm a part of that I think are trying to think about these sort of questions. I was just in San Francisco over the weekend at this event called Funding the Commons. It's at this the Frontier Tower, wherein it's like a 16-story tower in downtown San Francisco, and they have every floor is based on something uh, ultimately related to how technology can be used for to change and improve people's lives in different ways. So the 14th floor is for human flourishing, and so there's uh, co-creative design sessions that they're doing. There's connections with a number of these organizations that are trying to build tools for the future. That's
nice.
and then there's other organizations that I'm a part of that people could join, regardless of where they live. I've been doing one project for the Collaborative Technology Alliance. It's called Open Haven, and it's openhaven.net. It is a navigator of what decentralized tech tools could be used to build apps, so to get away from the centralization of the major social media companies to say, like, what are we trying to do? What use case? Is it like we want to foster better communication or better security in a digital identity? And then it walks you through the process of use cases and then into affordances, and then into tech tools. Now, that's a rather technical thing, but it is for communities, it is for builders of these technologies to figure out how we can design these tools, and then you would probably also want to bring in people who are uh, whose special skills and capacities are how to design these front end interfaces that really foster this development in relationality.
Yeah, so what I'm envisioning is basically, if I understand you correctly, what you're setting up is like a network of portals that provide people with access to a buffet of different types of pathways to development and to connection and to potential engagement with civil activities and political evolution, etc. And I think it, I think that's very beautiful, and that if you're able to frame it in that way as access into larger worlds of interconnection and meaning, that it will be very appealing for people.
Yes, yes.
And you've dedicated, I think, well, at least 5 years of your life to this project, if it's not more.
Well, yeah, actually, that's interesting that you say that, because until recent weeks, I thought these were, rather distinct projects, but they've just in recent weeks, I've seen that they actually converged. So now I can look back and say, what you said there is accurate. I have been working on this project that I'm now understanding it, this multifaceted project. with several co-creators who was dedicated work with, has been quite essential to all of this as well.
Yeah, it's very nice. Yeah, it's only now after you've been speaking about the details, am I seeing it as a sort of a pathfinder project where people can find their path through reality based on sort of an organized structure, both physical and digital, and with an overarching framework of development and holism at its center.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like a good place to conclude. And you've already said how people can get into these projects and connect with you and potentially contribute. Anything else that you want to add that might help this emergence?
Well, yeah, again, I can mention that people can go to civicenlightenment.org and there's a contact form, and that's how people can get in touch with me. In addition, we are admittedly rather short on available like resources for this. Now, one thing that helps a lot is when people have time and energy to devote to this because they realize the positive impact that this has. There's also, though, admittedly, like some financial resources that we could definitely use in order to move this forward. Um, One thing that actually just recently happened that is giving us a fighting chance is that you can use AI to code just about anything. We have these ideas, and before we didn't have anywhere near the resources to develop this stuff because it takes so long. Now, we can actually take these ideas for developing software, and we can actually just create it, without too much difficulty. And now we still need some financial resources to do this stuff to implement it to test it to work with communities on utilizing it. And we could use some financial resources to move that forward.
Excellent. So anyone who can, they can help you. And yeah, I'm looking very much forward to what this project can become in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Lee.
You too. Take care.
All right. Have a good day.